everybody. Welcome to Saturday afternoon. Hope you are doing well. I'm getting organized here as we get about ready to start. So if you can hear me, it would be fantastic if in the chat you can say hi back to me, or you can say what's up, or I can hear you. That would be awesome, so I know that you can hear me. There is a delay. There is about, I want to say it's about 10-second delay, and it's really weird to see myself in one video. I can see myself right now, and in the YouTube video, I'm still like 15 seconds behind. So if you can hear me, if you can see me, I'd love for you just to say in the chat, yes, hi, what's up, anything, so I know that we're good and you can hear me. Thanks again for joining me on this Saturday afternoon. I'm saying afternoon because I'm assuming that I have some East Coast people. I'm here on the West Coast in San Diego, so it's only 10:29 technically right now. So for me, it's still good morning, but I know for many of you, it is probably the middle of the afternoon. So trust you are well. We're gonna do some pretty awesome things today. So I've made a list here of, well, let's be honest, it's more than 5. But some great ways that you can make teaching Sunday school easier. I think you're gonna love it because I've been teaching the Sunday school for a long time. I might not look like it, but I've actually been teaching Sunday school for almost 20 years. That sounds bizarre even for me to say, but I've been teaching for a long time, and I love teaching Sunday school. And this is not a bunch of stuff that I have, went to school for, or I read in a textbook. This is all stuff that I've just kind of learned over the years. So you're not hearing this from an expert professor who has had 15 years of, traditional schooling and who will now share with you the wisdom of textbooks. No, this is just me talking to you as someone who has been, in the trenches, so to speak, and who enjoys what they do and who loves sharing with others and who really just wants to help you to be able to teach like you want to. Because we'll talk about this a little bit as I get started here in a second, but what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to think, oh my goodness, this is terrible, I can't be you, so I'm going to ignore this. I don't want you to think that you can't be you, because that's the most important thing. That's the only way this is going to work. If you try to be me, if you try to be someone else you've seen on a YouTube video, if you try to be another Sunday school teacher that maybe teaches in your same church, if you try to be your pastor, you're going to fail. Because you can only be you, and God made you unique and specific and exactly who you were supposed to be. And He's put you probably in front of a bunch of kids to teach. And I just want to help you to be able to express who you are. So that's the goal of this training. That's all we're going to do. So if you have questions along the way, I would encourage you to reach out to me and ask them. And the best way to reach out to me is to put in the chat box, which I'll make sure in a second that I'm pointing the right direction. But if you reach out to me in the chat box, which I think is over here, I'm guessing. Yeah, I think that's right. You feel free to type questions. Let me know if you don't understand something. And I will be watching the chat as I'm talking. And then maybe if we take a break in the middle, I'll be glad to answer questions. Ask anything you want. Open forum, I think, for the most part. This will be a fantastic time. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm so glad you're here. But I also value your time. So I want you to know we're not going to spend a lot of time wasting time. I'm giving everybody just a few minutes just to jump in. There's an email that just went out reminding everyone to jump on. So I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to see this and join us live, because that is the best way to connect personally with me, is to join this chat live. I'm here, I'm watching. So far there's not been anyone brave enough to say hi in the chat that I can tell, but I would love for you to say hi. I'd love to connect with you. Let me know, are you a Sunday school teacher? Maybe you lead Sunday school teachers? Maybe you're the pastor of your church. Or maybe you're like me and you're a volunteer teacher and you volunteered maybe for a long time. Maybe you're volunteering next week or this coming weekend for the first time. I'd like to know a little bit about you. Where are you from? Because right now, I can't see you. I can't hear you. All I'm doing is looking at this camera, and it's just kind of a black circle staring back at me. So I would love to know a little bit about you. Mandy, thanks for jumping in. I look forward to hearing from a bunch of you, and I will get to your questions. I love hearing them. So again, there's about a 15-second delay here. So if you think of something to ask, just pop it in the chat immediately. Don't wait for me to ask for questions. Just throw them in the chat room. It is not rude. It is not going to be that much of a distraction, I don't think, and I will get to them. Mandy, how can you manage class 3rd through 5th grade with children who do not have the ability to stay quiet, on task, or in their seat? I think Mandy teaches a class much like mine. Mandy, great question. Let me run through some of this because actually I think I can help you answer that question just with some of the notes I have here for this training. And we'll see how we do. And after that, feel free to follow up. So what I'd like to do today, let's just jump in. What I'd like to do today is I would like to give you at least 5 ways to make teaching Sunday school easier. So let's get started. Number 1, I don't know that anyone would necessarily argue with me that this isn't true, but on its head, I don't think we always think about it. You have to remember that teaching Sunday school is more than just teaching the facts of the story. I've experienced a lot of different Sunday school curriculum, and I'm not here to really comment on any of them. I don't like to put down or even, in any way compare. But what I do think is that it's interesting that some, even curriculums, they give you the facts of the story, and that's it. Abraham did this, and then he did this, and then he did this, and God did this, and that's what we learn, and we should learn from that we should do X, Y, and Z. I think we should take a different approach. I believe that a lot of the Bible is in story form. Jesus taught in stories. A lot of times we call them parables. Much of Scripture is a narrative, is a story. We're not just told fact, fact, fact. We're given little pieces of how somebody felt, or where they traveled, or how long it took, or what people said in response to what somebody said. We're given more of a narrative or a story of what happened. But then when it comes to Sunday school, oftentimes we're basically okay with telling the kids Jonah disobeyed, he got swallowed by a fish, and he got spit out 3 days later, and the people of Nineveh repented, and Jonah was mad. No wonder it's boring. No wonder, frankly, kids can't sit still long enough, because they don't see that anywhere else. If they watch an amazing movie from Disney, and they watch it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, they know the story. The second time they've seen it, the third time they've seen it, they know exactly what's going to happen. They're not listening for the facts of the story. They're interested in how it makes them feel. They're interested in seeing something they've never seen before and catching a detail that maybe they've never thought of before. Those are the kind of things that we need to bring to our storytelling. I'm not saying we need to add things to the Bible, not in any way. I don't believe in that. I don't think we should ever do that. But I think we should put ourselves or imagine ourselves as that character in the story and help kids empathize with that character. So Esther, how would she have felt going to this competition, if you will, to be potentially chosen as queen and then to win the whole thing? Like, as a woman, I can only imagine what that must have felt like, but that must have been quite the experience. And then you flip that on its head, and a couple chapters later, what must it have been like for Esther not knowing the end of the story, which is hugely important. Because if you know the end of the story, then big deal. You're going to go before a king, and he's going to say it's okay, and he's going to listen to you. She didn't know that. So you can read in the narrative, basically she resigns herself, well, I might die, but it's worth it. And those moments in the story, I believe, communicate just as much as the facts, because the facts then become critically important, because the kids can feel the intensity of that moment. And then when they see the decision that character made, all of a sudden it's like, wow. I mean, maybe I've never had to decide if it's life or death on a certain decision, but I can't imagine what that must have been like. If we help kids understand that there is real life happening, and part of real life is feelings and being, scared, being afraid, being angry, being happy. If we can start to be expressive in that way, however you express that, whether you just talk about someone being angry, whether you pretend to be angry, it's all the same. But it communicates way more than just the facts of the story. Listen to this. I found this quote. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. I think you can learn a lot of things from that. But when I see that, I see a vessel. It's not a vessel to be filled. It's not taking a bunch of facts and dumping it in someone's head. But it's a fire to be kindled. Let me show you something that you've never seen before. What must it have felt like? And all of a sudden in their head, they're like, whoa. So I want you to focus on more than just the facts of the story. Read the story you're about to teach a couple times and put yourself in the moment. What must it have felt like in the moment? And then say that when you get there. This isn't in the Bible. But what must it have felt like to be Abraham, Noah, Isaac, Moses, David, Joshua, Esther, Ruth? Pick your character. That makes for a great story, and that makes for moments where I don't care how crazy your kids are, if they get a taste of that intensity of that moment, they're glued. So, number 1, teach more than just the facts. Number 2, comparison is the thief of joy. It's also great for teaching Sunday school. All right? Comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's just a great life principle. I didn't write that down, but I just know it's true and I've heard it before. But you must use comparison in your stories because it is awesome. Let me give you a super recent example. So recently, I was teaching kindergarten through 6th grade elementary chapel in a Christian school. And we were talking about the name of Jesus, that Mary was told by the angel Gabriel to name the Savior, Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. The whole point of this was that Jesus was born to die, which is pretty remarkable if you think about it. So one element that really drives that home is the wise men. They gave Jesus gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The gold for a king, the frankincense because he was a priest, his priestly duties, and then myrrh. What was myrrh used for? Well, it's used actually later in the life of Jesus when Nicodemus and, is it John? They go to the grave, and it actually says they use myrrh as part of the embalming spices. Myrrh was something that oftentimes they used on dead people. So to bring myrrh, here's the comparison. To bring myrrh, it would be like someone bringing flowers to a brand new mother and saying, here, these flowers are for when your child dies. This is for their grave. Do what? That would be crazy. Why would you give a king who you've given gold to also give him myrrh? There may have been other reasons they gave him myrrh. I'm not saying myrrh was only used for dead people, but out of all the spices to give, out of all the things to give, you picked one that includes its use on dead people? That speaks powerfully to what myrrh represents. Oh, dead people? Oh, comparing it to bringing flowers to a new mother and saying this is for the grave of your child one day? You start to feel a little something. And did I, become an actor on stage? No. I just compared the two things. You understand a little bit about myrrh and you think of something in modern day times to compare to. It's fantastic. So when you think about comparison, think about the word like. L-I-K-E. Jonah being swallowed by a fish was like this. Myrrh was like this. It would be like doing this. It's really not rocket science. Just think about what happened. Is somebody feeling something? That would be like somebody telling you to so-and-so. The parable of the prodigal son, one of my favorite examples, when the prodigal asks his dad, again, it's a parable, so it's not a real story, it didn't happen in real life, but Jesus is making a point, and he says, imagine if a kid asks his dad, hey dad, can I have my inheritance? That is like him saying, Dad, would you just go ahead and die so I can have my money? Like that's what the locals were thinking when Jesus would have said that. The word like is a very powerful word that immediately takes us out of biblical first century narrative that it might be hard for us to understand context and really how those words would have felt. And it drops us right into 2020. And can we all just say 2020? Like, what in the world? I remember the year 2000 and I thought, oh wow, this is modern times. But we're now living in the future. There were movies that were 2020, A Space Odyssey. We're living in that time. Anyway, it's crazy. All right, so number 1, teach more than just the facts. Number 2, compare. If somebody wants to write these down in the chat, that'd be awesome. Number 1, more than just the fact. Teach more than just the facts. Number 2, compare, compare, compare. Use the word like. Number 3, this might be your favorite one. Could be. I think one of the easiest ways to make Sunday school teaching easier is to not do it. In other words, it doesn't always need to be you. I'm going to suggest that you probably know 2, 3, 4 people, maybe just family members, who would be great as a special guest Sunday school teacher. I'm not suggesting that you go to someone and say, would you teach every week for me for the next 9 weeks? I'm not asking you to ask someone for a long-term commitment. I'm suggesting that perhaps someone you know might be willing to teach one time on one Sunday or Saturday or whatever your application is here. What if you went to someone that you know and trust and you say, hey, our story in 3 weeks is on Nehemiah, building the wall. You're a construction builder. I think it'd be awesome if our kids got to meet someone who actually builds things for a living today and got to hear the story from you. Hey, I have a great curriculum I could send you. It includes everything you need. It includes a full script, some creative, funny ideas. But you take that script and you make it your own. You can present it however you'd like to. But I would love for you to come teach my Sunday school class. It's every Sunday morning at 9:30, and we're in the room on the right on the hallway by the green poster, whatever. One of the best ways to teach Sunday school is to mix it up. I think one of the advantages that large church has that I don't think they always use is they can mix up the teachers all the time. You can have a great teacher, but I think if you had a couple teachers, that kind of gives the kids a sense of what's going to be this week. Because everybody has a different style. Everyone teaches differently. Even if you have two people with the same teaching philosophy, it's still going to sound different. It's going to be presented differently. That's going to be fantastic. So I would invite a special guest to speak. Try it one time. If they knock it out of the park, then in a couple months, go back to them. Well, first of all, if they knock it out of the park, tell them that day they did, and thank them immediately the next day. That goes a long way. Because that, number one, that says thank you, but number two, builds their confidence. And if teachers or if those kind of people aren't used to teaching, they want immediate positive feedback. Quickly, they need reinforced, they did a fantastic job, and then that sets them up for 2-3 months down the road. You're like, hey, you want to try that again? Don't ask them the next week. Don't ask them as soon as they're done teaching, hey, would you teach for the next month? That'll kill your mojo. You'll never get anyone else to volunteer because they'll tell everyone, like, oh, I taught once and now I'm there every single week. But I would invite someone special and just see what happens. You might be surprised. Okay, so number one was compare. Number two, doesn't always need to be you. And number three, well, I messed up, but let's start over. Number one was teach more than just the facts. Number two was compare. Number three, it doesn't always need to be you. Number four, do not make this the 6th day of school. They have been, most of these kids, if you're teaching, kindergarten through whatever, they've been at school all week. Kindergartners, hit or miss, but any grader, first grader, second grader, third grader, they've been at school every single day that week, most likely. So don't make it another day of school. Yes, you need to teach. Yes, it's an environment for learning. But if you make Sunday school another day of grinding it out over education, do you really think kids are going to want to come back? I don't think so. And part of the goal here, the main goal being teaching them Jesus, but a secondary goal is continuing the game. You don't get the opportunity to teach them Jesus if they don't come back. So continuing the process here, perpetuating the Sunday attendance, that's very important. Because you can think, well, if they never come back, I need to nail them with everything I got. Well, okay, but you only get that one chance then. But if your focus is on how can I present Jesus creatively and how can I get them to enjoy this so they come back, then you get another chance and another chance and another chance and another chance. That's pretty cool. Listen to what Mr. Rogers said. He said, play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning. But for children, play is serious learning. Play is really the work of childhood. When I first read that, I thought, yeah, that's really good for like preschoolers. But when do we leave childhood? I don't know, but I don't think it's first grade. I have a second grader right now. I don't think hasn't left childhood. He still loves playing. And play is the work of childhood. So don't set aside play. Don't set aside, really creative ways to teach or to share information or to drive home some application point with a game, with something fun. Because play is important, especially with kids, and I think it's underestimated even with adults. If we're having fun, we tend to remember those things. Like, think about your life. You don't tend to remember the things that were emotionally neutral. You tend to remember the negative, the bad stuff, and the really good stuff. So why not try to move your Sunday school hour into the really good stuff, part of my memory, part of my experience? Why not make it fun? Yes, we're there to teach them God's word, but it should be way more attractive than school. Play games, have fun, laugh. Your kids aren't going to beg to go back to a place because of the quality of information that they received. They're kids. Let them be kids. Teach them a story, make it fun and interesting, and then play a game. or act it out. Have fun with it. It's more important than you think. And once you try this, you know what's going to happen? You're going to have kids come back a week later, a month later, a year later and say, you remember that one week we did that game where we and somebody messed up and somebody said this, and then they'll remember it for the rest of their lives. I think about the stuff I remember from my growing up in Sunday school. It was the times we did fun stuff. I will never forget measuring Noah's Ark in the parking lot. We walked off the entire thing. I don't remember all the times we sat around the table and just talked about the story. Those aren't impressed in my head. I'm not saying that's never important. I'm just saying that should be more than, than the exception to the rule. I would introduce fun on a regular basis. Try it. See what happens. Number 1, teach more than just the facts. Number 2, compare. Use the word like. Number 3, it doesn't always need to be you teaching. Number 4, don't make it the 6th day of school. Number 5, mix up the routine. This goes along with don't make it the 6th day of school, make it fun. But a lot of us are routine people for this reason, because we're adults and because it's easier to plan and because it's predictable. But the problem is it's very predictable. I think there is tremendous value in having a system for kids being able to anticipate, every week when we hear the whistle or we hear the claps or the teacher says this, I know that it's time to go sit in a certain spot. Totally get it. But I think it's important also to mix up the routine. Don't always do exactly what's expected of you. For instance, if you think about just the story time, what if some weeks you did a lecture style lesson? What if other weeks it was more interactive writing and responding? What if you gave out a piece of paper and said, every time you hear this word, I want you to write it down? Or I'm going to tell you 3 things that you've never heard before, and I want you to write them down when I tell them to you. Or see if you can figure out from this story such and such. Or, actually, here's a great example. So right now I'm working on an Esther curriculum. It's a 5-week curriculum. And what we're doing is breaking up the story of Esther into boxes. So everyone gets a piece of paper, and they draw 6 boxes. And each box is a part of the story. Because the thing about Esther, it's got layers of story, right? It's got Queen Vashti, it's got the king, it's got Esther, it's got Mordecai, it's got Haman, it's got the Jews. It's got several characters to keep track of who's who. So having the kids draw important parts of the story, keep in mind, this is a dramatic story. Like, people are dying, being kicked out of the kingdom. I mean, this is a pretty intense story. But it's no longer sitting there listening to the story of Esther as someone talks about Mordecai and Haman and all these big words and what? Instead, it's drawing on paper and interactive learning. It's mixing up the routine of what a typical teaching, lesson story time is like. Some weeks do a group activity. For instance, in one of my Easter materials, we do a spy theme. So every week, they're detectives trying to figure out clues. And so we pass out clues. We make simple, piece of paper clues. But stuff like that helps those kinesthetic learners, those ones who need more than just, sitting here watching someone. They need interaction, they need to hold something. They need to touch, feel, talk, interact. That helps them connect the information into their head. And think about this. You tend to remember the things that you do what? That you write down. Look it up after this. There's a bunch of data. There's a bunch of information that says the best way to remember something is to take notes with a pen or pencil on a piece of paper. That's the way you most remember it. Number 1, because it's slower. But number 2, because there's something in your brain that when you take a pencil and you put it on paper and you do this, you are interacting with your head, with your mind in a different way than if you're just sitting and letting the information hit you as you stare at the teacher. This is powerful learning. So don't underestimate it. I mean, just take the idea I just gave you. Like, whatever your lesson is next week, have them draw however many boxes you can think of. Don't make it, 12. Make it 2, 4, 6. And have them draw each part of the story. Break up the story into 2 or 3 parts. Not only does it help them draw and interact with the lesson differently, but it kind of gives you a natural break every section of the story. If you want to review the first section before you went to the next section or whatever. It's great. All right. So last thing, and then I want to get to some questions. I produce Sunday school curriculum. I honestly haven't counted lately. It's like 160, 70, I don't know, weeks of materials. It includes worship videos, motions for those worship songs, activities, games, tons of object lessons, a lesson script, a memory verse, a take-home paper, a small group activity. It's everything you need to teach elementary kids about Jesus. It's aimed at 2nd to 4th graders. But I've used it for kindergarten through 6th grade before. So my philosophy is, if you aim at that 2nd to 3rd grade, you'll tend to get the first graders and kindergartners without making the story too simple for the 6th graders. So if you think elementary age kids, that's who this is for. I'm from a Baptist background, so that's kind of the approach my lessons take. However, whenever anybody asks me, I always like to say, we're covering the basics of the Bible here, so we're not going to get into eschatology or the gifts of the Spirit or, things that tend to separate out some of the different beliefs there. So we're talking about the basics, if you will. But I've had fun doing it. So if you're looking for curriculum, whether you want to, give it to someone and let them guest teach for you, if you want to mix up your method, go to betterbibleteachers.com, and I'd encourage you to join. There's a monthly price and there is a yearly price, and it's fantastic. And if you join today, actually, let me know. So if you join today, email me and say, hey, I joined after the webinar, after the teaching session, and you mentioned that you'd send me a free object lesson book, and I will do that. So I have a 79 object lessons book that's full of, object lessons on the fruit of the Spirit and the attributes of God and sin and the power of God, and I don't remember all the topics. But it's an electronic document. It's got videos. It's got all the directions you need, all the examples. So if you want that, only for today, sign up, join a monthly or yearly membership. I don't care. And I will send you a link to that document, and you will love it. I mean, it's worth whatever it is, $29 to sign up. It's fantastic. And the number one question I always get is, well, I know how the internet works, and I know what you're going to do. I'm going to sign up, and then it's going to be impossible to cancel. Well, let me just put you at ease. You don't even have to contact me to cancel. There's a My Account page once you sign in, and you can simply click cancel from there. So there is actually no need to contact me to cancel. It's really no problem at all to do. So if you join today, some people are going to be watching this later. So this is January 25th. It's a Saturday. So if you're here with me live, I'd love to have you a part of the membership, and I will send you that object lesson book if you join today. So I see we have some questions here. I'm going to love looking through these. Let me see what we have. So Mandy, let's talk about yours for a second. So how can you manage a 3rd through 5th grade class with kids who do not have the ability to stay quiet, on task, or in their seat? One thing I didn't talk about, Mandy, here that I think is super important is kids with maybe short attention spans. Make sure you're not even teaching the whole lesson to them in one sitting. I would teach little bits of it and then, teach a bit and then move around the room and teach another bit from another part of the room. Teach some of it while they're standing up. Teach some of it while they're sitting down. teach some of it while they're running in place. You have 3rd through 5th grade, so this is a little older audience, but I would encourage you, number one, that they're probably having a hard time staying quiet on task because something isn't engaging them in the way that they're used to. So I would try a number of different methods. Number one, I would try what we talked about earlier is make sure that you're introducing emotion and, what would it be like if this happened? Because if kids can picture themselves in the story, they are a lot more engaged than if it's just, this. Like, oh, them over there. Yeah, I know all about Ruth. So that's number one. Number two, one thing, and man, you may have done this already, but one thing that I found that works really well is oftentimes kids who have a hard time staying quiet or on task, it might be because of 1 or 2 kids who are driving that. You have several kids that are following them, but 1 or 2 kids are driving that. And Mandy, you may have already tried this, but I would partner with those kids who were driving the trouble. Because what I found, and I just last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in a 5th grade small group after the lesson. The person who was the most checked out was the one who was, frankly, the smartest one in the room. He knew more about the lesson than any of them. But he was checked out because it was boring. He was done with it. He knew it all. So partnering with someone like that to help you tell the story or to try to outwit and outsmart them, see if you can teach to that person, the one who thinks they know everything. Ask them a question. Don't embarrass them, but ask them a question to the point, and what you're doing is pointing out the fact that, maybe you don't know everything. There's lots of tactics here, but I would try those 2. Number 3, one more I'll mention is, if you haven't already, I would try just changing the atmosphere. So a simple way to do that is to turn on or off the lights. There's quite a few stories in the Bible that happen in the dark. I understand that the nature of completely blacking out the room is not a good idea. So if you just have one light switch and the room goes dark with that off, you may use a flashlight to keep a little bit of light in the room so people don't go crazy. But sometimes just changing the atmosphere in a room makes all the difference. Mandy, if you're in a small classroom, I would encourage you also change the environment by going outside, going to a different room, or if you have enough teachers where, you won't lose anybody. That's always my worst fear in Sunday school. But those are just a couple tips. Mandy, as I'm going through it here, if you have any other questions or any follow-up to that, feel free to drop it in the chat. Udine Stewart is a assistant in junior church. That's awesome. I had a great experience in junior church. I love my time there. I actually helped my junior church teacher coach basketball. I was in hog heaven. Udine, you asked, how can we make memory versus stick with the students? Good question. I don't have this in my curriculum, but one thing you may look up and may try is the memory palace method. I'm going to type that in here. So I'm going to say helping versus stick. Search for memory palace method. I won't go into detailed explanation, but essentially what you're doing is you're imagining a series of crazy events in your head, and that's helping you remember a verse. Because the brain tends to remember pictures more than just words. So if you turn the words into a picture and into a series of pictures, then it really helps the verses stick. Another thing, much more simpler than that, is repetition. When I was in 4th grade, I went to a Christian school, and my Christian school teacher, Monday through Friday teacher, Joshua 1:8, this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate on it there and day and night, that might deserve to do all things that are according to written. That verse, I think we said it every day for the entire year. Joshua 1:8, this book of the law shall not depart, every single day, every single morning. I don't know that you have to do the same verse for an entire year, But I would make sure that you're not going memory verse after memory verse after memory verse, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Because if, let's say you're changing it once a week, most parents are not at home reminding the kids of their memory verses. All right, most parents aren't natural teachers. Most parents aren't saying, what was your memory verse? Okay, Monday night, let's review it. Tuesday night, let's review it. So your kids are getting like maybe how long you're going over the memory verse? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? That's all they're getting before the next time you talk about it. So simple repetition. Pick one that you love and try it for an entire semester, an entire quarter. And then ask the kids who you don't think are paying any attention or have been there every week, and then you're like, they're not going to know it. See how much they know. Test it out. Because I promise, repetition over a long period of time, it works. I still remember Joshua 1:8, and it's not like I'm going over it every day as an adult, and that was in 4th grade. So it works. Sarah, behavior management. Yes, I get it. Boys are often the most trouble. So a lot of what we talked about today was actually aimed at the boys. I find that girls, in general, will sit and listen. It's the boys who I have trouble with. There's a couple tactics that work especially well with boys. One thing I've discovered over time, and I've actually heard a couple people talk about, is the tendency is to be a drill sergeant with your kids. Stop talking, don't do this, sit up, instruction. Sometimes I've discovered the best thing to do is to stop talking and wait. I've even seen somebody suggest to stop talking, strike pose, or even do something silly like, and wait for everyone to focus back. Try it, see what happens. Sometimes we think that the more we're on the kids, that's the only way to get them to behave. Sometimes it's as simple as just stopping. Let the room go silent. Sometimes that works really well. And if you have one person who just doesn't get it, pull them aside, put them beside you. I believe that sometimes it's the inverse techniques that work. Like if you bring up somebody who's having a hard time and sit them beside you, just try it, experiment. Put them in charge and say, okay, pretend their name was Sam. Okay, Sam, whenever you go like this, all the kids have to be quiet. And if you see anybody talking, you let me know. So Sam, anytime I say, I need everyone to be quiet, you're going to do this, and I expect everyone to be quiet. Put Sam in charge. Sometimes giving those troubled kids responsibility is like magic sauce. It's incredible. You're very echoey. Oh, sorry. I covered up the stream while I was talking. I'm very echoey. I don't know how to fix that. Hopefully it's a little better. I'll back my microphone up. Can I have your material? You're welcome to join. Yes, absolutely. Hey, I teach a range of kids from 8 to 12, approximately 11. How can I make it fun for them? And we have a Sunday school outside because it goes, Sunday school outside, like outdoors? That is amazing. So a range of kids from 8 to 12, about 11 kids. How can I make it fun for them? There's a lot of different ways to make it fun. I'd encourage, if you haven't, Bernadine, to go back and watch the video. I think all of these techniques will help make it more fun for you. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's tons of stuff that comes to mind. I'll give you one example. So if you're ever teaching on Zacchaeus or, Elijah, find a way to bring that into the story. So Zacchaeus, teach from a ladder. He's in the tree, so get up a ladder and get on top of it, or not, maybe not on top, depending on how stable the ground is, etc. Be safe. Find a ladder and teach from the ladder. If you have Elijah, one time I brought a big clear bucket in, put wood inside of it, filled it with water, and then talked to the kids about lighting it on fire. If you find ways to bring real life, so to speak, into your story, that can make a world of difference. All right? So those are just some ideas for you. That's all the questions I see in the chat. But again, watch through the video again if you want more ideas for making it fun. That's one thing I love to talk about. So if you need curriculum, if you're looking for something to kind of mix it up and maybe incorporate some of the ideas we talked about today into your style, into your classroom, I encourage you to check out betterbibleteachers.com. It's about 100 and, like I said, I don't remember exactly, 100 and let's say 64 weeks of material, lessons. Every week has a lesson, an activity, a small group. Many of them have object lessons, memory verses. Some of them have memory verse games, worship songs, take-home papers, all kinds of stuff. And for $29 a month or $300 a year, it's an incredible value. And it's not on my site, but if you join today, January 25th, I will email you a digital book that is 79 object lessons for Sunday school. There's no obligation, so you can cancel anytime you like. People always ask me, can I cancel whenever I want to? Absolutely. Only thing I say is when you cancel, make it at a time where you're no longer using the curriculum. So I don't let people join and then use my curriculum for the next 3 years and cancel after 1 month. But if you don't find it useful, hey, there's lots of solutions out there. I don't even pretend to be the only solution. So I love helping the people I can help, and I love doing it. So lastly, thank you so much for joining me today. We spent 45 minutes here. I trust it was valuable for you. I trust you learned something. I'm really sorry about the echoiness. I will listen back to this and try to fix that for next time. But I appreciate all of you. Thank you for teaching kids about Jesus. If you need to contact me, my website is betterbibleteachers.com. You can use the contact form there. It comes right to me. And yeah, thanks again for joining me. Until we talk again, have a great weekend, and thanks for teaching kids about Jesus. See ya.